Greetings and welcome to In-Depth. I'm Dike Rostant. We continue looking at the budget as presented by the Minister of Finance, and we do so with Dr. Daren Conrad, economist and lecturer. Welcome, Dr. Conrad. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
I'm all right, thank you, and I'm very excited to jump into this conversation because our time is our time today. So,
Exactly.
and so I want to go back a little bit and start where we left off in terms of getting a bit of an overview of the budget from where you sit, looking at the first presentation by the Minister of Finance. Thanks.
Right. In that initial presentation, what I did is I tried to put it into different categories. Listening to it is one thing, but then you sit down and you think about what went on and what was said. And starting off with what a lot of the discussion amongst my colleagues and other in other spheres is the price at which the budget was pegged at in terms of the price of oil, which is at $92.50 per barrel at $6 per barrel. But barring that, we have the different categories at the budget. I would say that we have the manufacturing sector that was addressed, the agricultural sector that was addressed, tourism, education. By and large, every sector was addressed in this particular budget. And I think some of the most, what stood out most in my mind would be, of course, not necessarily the increase in the price of fuel, because we knew that the minister hinted that that was coming. But in particular, they focus on the environment. There was an environmental awareness that I saw, and as well as a human capital development awareness that I saw. And I thought, in particular, with the environment, where we had the issues of the fines being increased for illegal lumber, illegal timbering, illegal quarrying. So these are, and for oil, I think is oil spills or something like that. So those are some of the things that stood out to me, as well as the human capital awareness, in that the gate was revised. Now, I knew that gate was going to be addressed, but it surprised me that it was addressed in a way that I didn't think that it would be addressed, in that it focused on those individuals who would then, in having associated programs, they are now able to do so, which I think is very, very important, because I know a number of students who were stuck. They said, oh my goodness, I did this with the intention of pursuing my bachelor's degree, and now I'm stuck because I just don't have the finances. And now they can breathe a sigh of relief. As a matter of fact, I've already spoken to a number of students who have expressed that they will be returning to do the bachelor's degree. So that bodes well in terms of what was presented. I know that there's some things that some people may not necessarily be happy with. I know that the medical fraternity, I think, was allocated 210 million coming out of the pandemic, and for the work that was done there, already hinting that they felt that that was not sufficient. I know that the Tobago House of Assembly, they also felt that what their allocation was not sufficient. We also have the issue of the government holding firm to the 4% in terms of the wage negotiation. So those are some of the things that really stood out in the budget. Notwithstanding, we had some other measures that were there for the small and medium enterprises, which I'm sure would be well received. So those are, I mean, the budget by and large, to me, it addressed a number of the major issues. But of course, the question looms in terms of where do we go from here? So the budget is a plan, but not necessarily something that would be implemented right away. We had the talk again of the Revenue Authority that coming online. So hopefully we'll see that coming on stream and make some type of difference in terms of the tax collections. We also had the personal allowance and being addressed, and again, that being increased. So that will bring some relief to some of the low and middle income earners in their allowances. And all of this with the view to addressing the issue of food inflation, which is at above 7%. So these are some of the issues that were addressed. And we can talk more about some of the other things that I felt were a little bit lacking.
And thank you so much. And the way that you said it makes me want to go back and ask about it at this point in time. Pegging the budget to a price of $92 US per barrel, $6 for gas. And Answer the person who says that we should possibly have been a bit more conservative with that price point.
Well, in my discussions, everybody, well, most people are of the opinion that this is not as conservative as they would have liked it to be. But then I looked at what it was measured, or what was used, what was the benchmark in coming up with this. And when we look at the benchmark from the different international agencies, we can say that it is conservative relative to those agencies. Conservative to our liking. As an economist, you will rarely want to err on the side of caution, but it's conservative relative to those international agencies. So again, it's conservative but relative to. Um, so I think, in all fairness, given where the oil prices are now, it's highly volatile. At its highest, the oil prices were at $144 a barrel back in April or somewhere there. And Friday, just before the budget, I think it was down to 78. It's extremely volatile. So to say we smooth it out with a 92, that may very well change. It may go well, of course, it may go up, it may go down, but the average may generally work out to be that. Now, this is based on what is going on in the global arena. Should that change, our position would change very quickly. And so by the mid year, we would see probably some revision to that if things are changing in the global arena. So I think it's conservative relative to the benchmarks that were used, because the benchmarks that were used are in excess of $100, and in some instances right at the cusp of the $100. So at 92.50, you're under $100, so you're in a safe zone, so to speak. But by mid-year, you will have to look at what's going on globally and see whether or not these international agencies are revising their figures and their outlook for the prices and their projections, and whether or not it needs to be revisited. But for right now, it makes the deficit look manageable, and it makes everything look manageable in that the deficit is what, 1.5 billion, which is manageable, which means things can work out if we hold to the plan that is there.
So we have about a minute and a half on this side of the conversation, Dr. Conrad, but I still want to pursue this point a little bit. So if we, most likely, it is very possible that we'll have to go back and rejigger and tweak things mid-year. Why not start people along that path at this point in time, saying, okay, well, it makes sense to start a habit so that you're able to continue with it regardless of what it looks coming mid-year?
I think what is happening here is that energy countries that are resource rich are riding the wave of these high energy prices. And I think they're going to do everything, not just Trinidad, resource rich countries are going to do everything to capitalize on these high prices while they can. And so, it stands to reason that that is where we would start, at that point.
All right, I take that point, and thank you so much. We continue the conversation. When we return, we are speaking with Dr. Daren Conrad, economist and lecturer. We return with more. Welcome back to In Depth. We are speaking with Dr. Daren Conrad about the recently presented budget. And thus far, Dr. Conrad, you've shared some of the things that you've seen, some of the things that really stood out to you, some of the surprises as well, looking at the emphasis on, or the focus rather, on environmental issues, how some of those things are going to be addressed, as well as building human capacity. You spoke about some challenges or some areas of lack. What would some of those be?
I think what I did not see come out clearly. Yes, the initiatives were really good, but what I did not see come out clearly was a sort of a thrust in terms of the whole issue of capital investment, literally taking this opportunity to really focus on building capacity in certain areas that could put us in good stead. For example, there was the mention of the agriculture. Yes, I know the Prime Minister said that the government can only do but so much, but then the private sector has to step in and take it to the next level. But of course, there can also be incentives in there. Yes, there was the incentive for the use of some of the, I think, the renewable energy or something like that in the agricultural sector. But I think there could be a little bit more emphasis on that. in terms of where are we going with that, it could be focusing on resilience. So, there could be incentives for, resilient agricultural practices rather than just, saying, yes, you use the renewable energy and that, you'll get an incentive for that. But actually the resilience, how do we go about, what are our farming practices? Because we are living in a time where we see constant flooding, and that ruins the crops. So the resilient farming puts the crops above the ground. So in the event of flooding, you will have the crops not being affected. So those are some of the things. I mean, there was mention of the road networks being addressed, um, but what about the subterranean mains that WASA constantly are plagued with problems that causes the erosion, that causes roads to collapse? Those are some of the areas that we can really focus on in terms of what are we going to do and how are we going to use this windfall meaningfully so that it can generate something that is sustainable in the future.
It makes me want to ask for the distinction between capital investment and the PSIP program. But even before I do something like that, though, you raise the point of money going into agriculture, saying, okay, well, it may be more private initiatives than public or governmental driven. But can a ministry benefit from money or resources not specifically pegged as a line item? And if so, how?
If what? Sorry, I missed that question.
Can a ministry, so like the agriculture ministry, can it benefit from money or resources not specifically earmarked or allocated to them?
Well, they can, yes, but it depends on what they're going to do with it in the long run. I mean, yeah, I mean, these ministries, yes, they have the allocations and so on, but it depends on what is going to be done with it in the long run. You see, the ministries are really the gatekeepers of these funds. And so they're going to make these determinations at some point. Yes, the allocations are there, but the ministries are now going to be the gatekeepers of these funds and making sure that, they're used in a way that can generate something that is meaningful. And that has to be given some thought at the level of the ministry, not necessarily at the level of the central government.
And that is one of the things that I think about, in the sense that if we're thinking about agriculture specifically, and one of the issues that has been raised is water management. So you just spoke about resilient farming, having crops above the water level in case of flooding, but also there's the issue of being able to almost like break silos. So if you're looking at works and transport or the Ministry of Rural Government that have equipment, that have persons with the capacity who are able to deal with certain things, what kind of arrangements can be made so that those conversations can be had? So this place can be dredged. This place can be made to accommodate water so that in the dry season, there's more water to be it's available. In the rainy season, there's less water available in these areas. So you're saying this is ministerial versus government, those conversations need to take place?
Well, yeah. Now, you're sort of answering the same question that you're asking, in that we oftentimes, ministries of government agencies, they react when something happens rather than have dialogue with those individuals who are actually on the ground doing the work and find out what needs to be done to mitigate some of these things that you would have encountered or experienced last year or the last 2 years. So what happens is that when there's a flood, when the rains come, the floods the floods, then you see the ministries and all these other agencies rushing in with assistance rather than have the dialogue up front. What can be done to mitigate these things? So it calls for a dialogue between all involved, not just one entity, all entities involved. What needs to be done? Again, how do we channel the resources that we have to address the issues or to mitigate some of these things that you do not experience them again, rather than wait until it happens again and again and again.
Looking at job creation, Dr. Conrad, it is interesting to see some of the things that are happening in terms of internships taking place, as well as possibly raising the retirement level. How do those things impact the overall scale of things, where we're looking at having jobs, having people working, not having people relying on pension as early? How do those factors interplay?
Well, one of the things that we are faced with, which we did not address and we did not talk about for a while, is the aging population. And with the aging population, this is where the NIS challenges and the sustainability of NIS comes out. Because now you have an aging population, you have more people who are retired living longer, and then you have less people entering the workforce making contributions to NIS. So you have that discrepancy there that will create problems. So now the challenge is, how do you sort of bolster the manufacturing sector and the other sectors and the SMEs to sort of generate that absorptive capacity for the already rich base of human capital that we have. Now, we have the human capital, but we just don't have the absorptive capacity to put those individuals or to mobilize those individuals into productive activities that will generate output as well as make contributions to NIS. So, again, it has to be twofold, not just necessarily raising the retirement age, but raising the retirement age is always a quick fix. But also, we also have to bear in mind that we also have a large base of human capital that we can mobilize. And we can mobilize those individuals in a meaningful way that would have a greater impact than simply increasing the retirement age. Um, because we have those individuals coming out with, let's say, some high grade skills, more attuned with the technology, really creative individuals, ready to work, eager to work, and those individuals, rather than simply saying, you know what, you were thinking you would retire by 62, but here what, wait till 65, you'll retire at 65. But the retirement age also, increasing the retirement age also is sort of in an implicit way tied to the lifespan. So every time the lifespan increases, the retirement age tends to increase. So, rather than think first about increasing the retirement age, think first about mobilizing our human capital base so that the contributions will be increasing on the input end, rather than paying out at the end, thinking about increasing those retirement ages.
Thank you so much. In the last 45 seconds that we have, Dr. Conrad, I'm giving you a title. You are the new finance minister, and what would you have done a little differently, if anything, with the budget as presented?
I would have been more conservative with the oil prices. I would have probably come in at $80-something a barrel.
All right, so we want to thank you very much, economist lecturer Dr. Daren Conrad, and we had this time together as opposed to saying, okay, well, we're possibly waiting. So thank you very much for the work that you're doing, and on behalf of the entire TTT team, yes, man, this has been In Depth with me, Dike Rostant. Thank you so much for joining us.